Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me? This is Damon.
Budget and Finance Committee regular meeting. It is a beautiful day in Winter Rock, Arizona. There has been moisture all across the nation, so it's a good day. It is currently 10:19, and I'm going to call the meeting to order. We are in person and also via teleconference. Welcome to everybody on the call. Thank you for your patience this morning. We had a great discussion with the Office of the Controller and also the Office of Management and Budget and the Office of the President and Vice President earlier. And so let's continue to conduct business in Budget and Finance. Miss Ramona Nelson, sorry, I was looking at where we were in the agenda. Could you take today's roll call?
Sure, roll call from the Budget and Finance Committee of the Nomination Council, June 6, 2022 regular meeting. Honorable Shandi Parrish.
Present.
Thank you. Honorable Shandi Parrish is present. Honorable Paul Slater.
Present.
Thank you. Honorable Paul Slater is present. Honorable Seth Damon.
Present. Can you hear me?
Are you going to do modification to the council rules or to the standing committee rules? Because like for journals, we could also do that as we adopt the agenda.
It's not something I'd considered doing before, but I'm willing to do that.
Like, are you still doing rule changes? Are you still?
Yeah. Dana finally sent me the Word document that we worked on in the past.
Would you consider a time limit as committees?
Okay.
Well, if you, I propose structure.
Okay. Can anyone hear me on the call?
Can you hear us on the...
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Ramona, I'm here online. I can see you.
Okay.
I know, I have an owl looking at me.
No, they can hear me.
That's probably why Laura and I can hear.
Yeah. Okay, continue on with the roll call. I'm sorry. Honorable Seth Damon.
Honorable Seth Damon responded to the roll call.
Okay, thank you. Honorable Seth Damon is present. Honorable.
I'm here, Ramona.
Thank you. Honorable Seth Damon is present. Honorable Amber Smith-Bott-Crotty.
Present.
Thank you. Honorable Amber Smith-Bott-Crotty is present. Honorable Norman Mbigay. Thank you. Honorable Norman Mbigay is present. Honorable Marlo Asseret is excused. And Madam Chair, we have 5 members present upon roll call. Madam Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Nelson, for taking today's roll call. Colleagues, I'm going to say a quick prayer before we begin. Dearly Father, we thank you for another day to serve the Navajo Nation and the Navajo people. Today we pray for the President of the Navajo Nation, the Speaker of the Navajo Nation Council, the Chief Justice of the Navajo Nation, and also the members of the 25th Navajo Nation Council. Today, God, we just ask for travel mercies and also just for guidance in today's meetings that we have all across the nation, and we pray for the well-being of our people. May today's meeting in Budget and Finance continue the services that our people need, and we just ask for provisions and everything in Jesus' name. Amen. Let us continue on with our agenda. Today we are on item 2, recognizing guests and visiting officials. In the room with us, we have Mr. Dominic Bial from the Office of Management and Budget, and we also have our staff assistant from the Office of the Speaker, and thank you for being here. So we also have Ms. Sarah Slim on the line from the Office of the President and Vice President. Ms. Sarah Slim. Second call. Third call. Okay, no representation from the Office of the President and Vice President. Let's move on to item We were joined by Mr. McKay, the controller. The nomination. Item number 3, review and adopt today's agenda. Ms. Naka, can you read today's proposed agenda into record?
This is the proposed agenda of the Budget and Finance Committee of the Nomination Council, June 6, 2023. It's a regular meeting via teleconference. Presiding in Shawnee Parish, Chairperson Carl R. Slater, Vice Chairperson, Place Budget and Finance Committee, Conference Room, and Block. Nomination 1, call the meeting to order. The roll call, the invitation 2, recognize guests and listing officials. 3, review and adopt the agenda. 4, review and adopt the journals. There are journals for meeting night 2023, May 16th, 2023. 5, receive reports. A, FY 24 budget update, budget instructions manual update. Presenter Dominic Pial, Director, Office of Management and Budget. B, overview of the history of the Phoenix Indian Center Fund. Presenter is Sean McKay, Controller, Office of the Controller. 6, old business notes. 7, new business. A, legislation number 0116-23. B, legislation number 0117-23. C, scheduling a work session with the FRF office for June and July. D, scheduling June 2023 meeting. E, rescheduling July 4th regular meeting to June. And then F, scheduling regular meetings from July through September in BFC members districts. 8, close of the session and announcements adjourned. The next meeting is June 20th, 2023.
Thank you, Ms. Naka, for reading the agenda into record. Members, do you have a motion to accept today's agenda?
Chair, if you and the committee would accept it, I'd like to motion and then do a comprehensive amendment to the agenda. Committee members can request to modify it.
Vice Chair Slater, motion to accept today's agenda. Do we have a second?
Should I share what the modification would be, or?
Okay.
I just at the committee level, oftentimes we just do it all in one vote, so we don't have any votes. And my amendment would be for items 7C through F.
Wait, you just have a motion for the agenda?
Let's
Okay,
do
we'll just do that.
the adoption.
And then I'll let someone else motion them.
Okay.
So we don't motion for the agenda?
I withdraw my motion.
Delegate Begay motions to accept today's agenda. Do we have a second? Do we have a second to adopt today's agenda?
I'll second, and then I'll request one.
Okay, thank you, Vice Chair Slater. Vice Chair Slater seconds the motion to adopt today's agenda. Okay, I recognize Vice Chair Slater.
Thank you. I'd like to consolidate 7C through F into one scheduling action item. And we'll just call it future schedule. I mean, we'll go point by point on the future meetings, and then we'll go out and go through.
Okay. Thank you, Vice Chair Slater, for making that amendment. Do we have a second to Amendment 1? Shredded Delegate Amber Knez-McCarty seconds the motion. Great. Okay, let us vote on Amendment 1 to modify today's agenda.
Sure, Madam Chair. We'll call vote on the amendment. Honorable Norman M. Begay, how do you vote? Thank you. Honorable Norman M. Begay votes green. Honorable Amber Knez-McCarty, how do you vote? Green. Thank you. Honorable Amber Knez-McCarty votes green. Honorable Carl Slater, how do you vote?
Green.
Thank you. Honorable Carl Slater votes green. Honorable Seth Damon, how do you vote?
Vote green.
Thank you. Honorable Seth Damon votes green. Madam Chair, we have 4 members voting in the affirmative, 0 opposing. Madam Chair not voting, and 1 member excused. Madam Chair?
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Nelson, for reading or taking today's roll call vote. Members, we've modified the agenda. Okay, back to the main motion, which is Delegate Begay and also second by Vice Chair Slater. So, Ms. Naka, can you do second read of today's agenda?
Okay, the second reading is to do sort of like a consent agenda, I guess. Consolidating the 7C through 7F as one motion.
Title future meetings schedule. That's what it says.
Okay, thank you. Now, Ms. Nelson, can you help us with the roll call vote to accept today's modifications in the agenda entirety?
Sure. Roll call vote on the main motion. Honorable Norman McGay, how do you vote?
Green.
Thank you. Honorable Norman McGay votes green. Honorable Aberkan Bakari, how do you vote? Red. Thank you. Honorable Aberkan Bakari votes red. Honorable Carl Slater, how do you vote?
Green.
Thank you. Honorable Carl Slater votes green. Honorable Seth Damon, how do you vote?
Green.
Thank you. Honorable Seth Damon votes green. Madam Chair, we have 3 members voting in the affirmative, 1 opposing, and Madam Chair not voting. Madam Chair?
Thank you, Ms. Nelson, for taking today's roll call vote on the agenda. Let's move on to item 4, review and adopt the journals. Today we have, the committee is going to review the journals of May 9th and May 16th. Would Ms. Nelson, could you identify the journals or?
Yes, Madam Chair, the review and adopting the journals on May 9th and May 16th, those were emailed out to the committee for the review and the approval for this meeting. Madam Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Nelson. Members of the Budget and Finance Committee, do we have a motion to accept the journals for May 9th and May 16th?
Motion.
Vice Chair Slater motions, do we have a second? Shadow Delegate Anderson Body seconds the motion. Okay, Ms. Nelson, can you help us with a roll call vote for the adoption of the journals?
Sure, Madam Chair. Roll call vote for the journals. Honorable Norman McGay, how do you vote? Honorable Norman McGay, how do you vote? Norman? Thank you. Honorable Norman McGay votes green. Honorable Anderson Bakari, how do you vote? Green. Thank you. Honorable Anderson Bakari votes green. Honorable Carl Slater, how do you vote?
Green.
It's okay. Thank you. Honorable Carl Slater votes green. Honorable Seth Damon, how do you vote?
I vote green.
Thank you. Honorable Seth Damon votes green. Madam Chair, we have 4 members voting in the affirmative, 0 opposing, and Madam Chair not voting. Madam Chair?
Thank you, Ms. Nelson. Okay, let us move on to item 5A, which is we are going to welcome Mr. Vial to give a FY24 budget update, also the budget instructional manual update to the committee. So, Mr. Vial.
Thank you, members of the committee, Controller McCabe and others in the room and also online listening to the discussion. I have a short paper, a written paper that will be the update for today's meeting. And as is my style, I don't make it very long, so I'll go ahead and refer to it. Attached is the schedule of budget activities in the preliminary budget process. Okay, what I mean by the preliminary process is there's a series of budget activities that are occurring now. such as the construction of the BIM, discussion on the various budget issues, and so on. And it all leads to the formal budget process, which is the day the BNF committee approves the budget legislation, the timetable, and so forth. That's the official start and launch. So this one speaks more about the preliminary budget activities. That's the difference. But it is now scheduled for June 20th. Your next meeting, the BNF committee, is when hopefully everything will be ready for the committee's consideration and approval. So some of the highlights so far, and some of these matters I covered in a previous written report to the committee. The BIM is being drafted and it will contain some changes. I have 2 listed there, revising the budget performance assessment section, including budget form 2. And it's intended that these revisions will improve the process. Number 2, budgets will be prepared at level of detail 4 instead of 6. This will reduce the budget form 4 content by removing some of the object codes detail. The budget forms should be easier to prepare, read, and use. Letter B, one potential issue being reviewed now is how Navajo Nation Council Resolution CD 7222 affects fund lapses and carryovers, i.e., meaning that is the personnel lapse funds for budgeting. Generally, carryovers are no longer allowed, so amendments may be necessary if it is the intent to continue the personnel lapse savings. DOJ, OOC, OMB, and Legislative Council are considering this matter currently, and legislation to remedy the matter should be drafted soon. The copies are the 3 branch chiefs of this particular memo and report. So moving to the second page is the timeline. Number 1 being March 31st, when the controller issues the 24 revenue projection at the second quarter end. The status, this was done, it was completed on 3/31/23. Number 2, during the month of April or OMB would issue the request for fixed cost budgets, which would be due April 24th. The first bullet there, the status, it has been completed by OMB. The memos were sent to the involved programs, and most have been received. The second bullet, fixed cost budget allocations are now being completed. Now, just a reminder, the reason this is listed here is because the revenue projection, which you've all heard by now, which is the regular general fund revenues plus the 40 million from the permanent trust fund 5-year plan, is a little bit over 200 million. So the first action that we take is to deduct whatever the fixed cost budget amount is. So, and that's the reason for that is because fixed costs are generally obligations, legal requirements, such as agreements, so on and so forth.
Sorry, they told me they can hear me drinking my soda because it's so close to me.
So fixed costs are taken off the top to start with.
Yeah, push it over there, the other.
And then the balance.
Let it look at Carl.
You can still see.
No,
they said they
could hear him.
It's okay.
Go ahead, Mr. Bial.
And then the resulting balance is the discretionary amount. That's where the 3 branch chiefs will consider and make a recommendation as to each branch share of that amount. So that would be less fixed costs. And typically, the branch chiefs would make that recommendation in writing via a branch chief's agreement to the BNF committee. So that's the reason that fixed costs are mentioned specifically. Number 3, OMB revises, updates the annual budget instructions manual, the BIM. And the status as of now, the proposed BIM is about 95% complete. Executive reviews are being done, and the proposed BIM should be available June 14th. And for BFC legislation dropped on June 14th. Okay, that's the 5-day window for the 5-day review comment period leading up to the BNF committee meeting on the 20th. So those are the target dates. Number 4, on about June 12th or 13th, the branch chiefs meeting as necessary to review the revenue projections, the planning allocations, the fixed costs, and external fund match amounts. Prepare branch chiefs agreement. The bullet there, the status is upcoming to be scheduled. And you heard Chief of Staff, Mr. Sandoval, this morning make reference that they're communicating now with the other 2 branch chiefs to arrange this particular schedule. Now, just a note to you all that the branch chiefs meeting is not a requirement, meaning it's not in law, code, or anything, but it's become a customary and traditional practice over the last 20 years or better. So that's why the word says as necessary. In other words, if the branch chiefs do not meet, they can't get their schedules together, or they'll just leave it up to BNF, and the BNF would be the ones to make those decisions. Number 5, June 14th, BNF committee would drop or introduce the 24 budget legislation involving the revenue projection, the branch planning amounts, the fixed cost cash match, and then the BIM. The status, it's upcoming. The legislation introduction should be done no later than 5 days prior to the June 20th, 23 Budget and Finance Committee meeting. Number 6, June 20th, that's your next regular meeting. The BNF committee would consider and act on the fiscal year 24 budget legislation. Number 7, therefore, the budget development process would officially be underway as guided by the budget calendar, the Budget and Finance Committee resolution, i.e. the division branch budgeting, oversight committees review recommendations, and Navajo Nation Council adoption. So these activities, some of them, as you see, are already underway. Some of them have been completed. Some have yet to be done. Now, this is a typical schedule. The major change here is that my prior report last month is we were hoping that the meeting for the BNF committee to act on the entire budgeting process would have been today, June 6th. But all of these things are taking more time than we first envisioned. So now we're to the June 20th, which is almost to the day the same as the 23 budget calendar. So that's the overview and the report on where we are on the 24 budget process calendar, some of the key activities and so on. And just yesterday, I took pen in hand and marked up the budget calendar that would come eventually to the BNF committee, just to show from June 20th on, all of the various activities they're from or they're for. And that would become, if the legislation is written the way it typically is, that's going to become an exhibit to the budget resolution. So it would serve as a guide to everybody when the oversight or when the budgeting process starts, when the branch chiefs need to do their internal planning amount allocations, when their budget hearings ought to happen, if they have budget hearings, it's optional, it's up to them. And then when the oversight committees will meet, including the BNF committee. BNF committee is oversight to my office as well as the controller, tax commission office, and various others. So that's when you would hear our formal budget requests and proposals. And then subsequently, the Budget and Finance Committee meeting, where the oversight committees will present their resolutions along with their budget recommendations to the BNF committee for your review and consideration. And then the BNF committee, after hearing all of that, will make final decisions on what budget recommendations would be included in the overall comprehensive budget. And therefore, at that point, it would move on to NABI committee at the end of August, the end of August, and then to the budget, or to the, Navajo Nation Council budget session, which by law needs to be completed with council action no later than 20 days prior to the end of the fiscal year. So that target date is always September 10th. That's why typically the Navajo Nation Council would come into budget session on about September 7th, which is the day after Labor Day. It's also Navajo Nation Fair Week. So that's typically when the budget session will be held. In my recollection, there's only been 1 year when the budget session went into a weekend. One time it went into a Saturday in order for the council to complete the budget. Fortunately, ever since then, everything's been timely. In fact, there's been a time or two that you finish ahead of time. In fact, 4 years ago, if I remember right, Delegate Crotty and those that were here at the time, you remember we went to budget session at council. And I forget who was the chair at the time, BNF, the sponsor of the committee of the legislation, presented the overview of the budget. And there was an automatic motion to approve the budget in total. So it was all done in an hour. That's not normal, it's not typical, because usually there's discussion going on into day 2, 3. So that was unusual, but it can be done that way. And the reason for that is because we're all aware, you've heard this already, is that a lot of these budgets are very well scrubbed by that point, meaning they've gone through layers of review, both internally at division levels and executive branch at the branch levels, the oversight committees, BNF, and then NABI, and finally it's before council. Typically, some of the amendments that might be made along the way would be if another fund source becomes available. It could be, for example, the UUFB. It could be if the personal lapse is still going to be there when the B&F committee decides if there's going to be a general wage adjustment and how much that's going to be, 3, 4, 5%, whatever that might be, and the corresponding amount. If there's any balance, the Budget and Finance Committee has used that fund to fund some other unmet needs. So that's where we are at this time. Madam Chair, committee members, that's the report.
Thank you, Mr. Vial. Members, do we have a motion to accept today's report? Motion. Senate Delegate Amber Canestra motions. Do we have a second? Vice Chair Slater seconds the motion. Okay, members, do we have any questions from Mr. Vial? Vice Chair Slater?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Bial, for the report. So on item B, can you go into a little bit more detail about, this seems to be basically the same information we got last time. And that is, there may need to be some sort of legislation. To me, I think that's a leadership decision on how it affects the personal lapse savings fund. My understanding was that the intent of the original legislation was that it wouldn't affect the personal lapse savings fund, but if the language is such that it is there an update on whether there does need to be legislation, 1, and then 2, are you aware of anyone who's working as a legislator on this matter? And is there anything beyond the personal lapse savings fund that's being affected by resolution CD 7222?
Mr. Vial?
Thank you, committee members, and speaking to Delegate Slater's question. What started this particular matter is research done by DOJ. The attorney Mel Rodas is the one who brought it up. Resolution CD 72-22 was passed in December of 22. So it was the last month of the last council, the last presidency, and so on. And as I recall, it was one of those consensus resolutions. There was a number of legislations that were passed by consensus. So there was little to no debate about it, discussion about it. So consequently, it wasn't realized until later on, now, literally a month or so ago, that this could become a problem. And that is that personnel lapse may not be allowed to be carried over by this resolution. So, as I say, DOJ, OOC, OMB, Legislative Council have now met on this and talked about it and came out with 3 possible options. One would be to amend the original personnel lapse legislation, which is CF 0711. So that was passed in 2011. That's the legislation where it puts a moratorium on general fund personnel expenditures during the 4th quarter. So the intention is to create that personal lapse balance. And most years it's been sufficient enough to fund the GWA. That's the purpose of it, the primary purpose of it. So one option is to amend that to make it more clear, more definitive. The second way would be to amend CD 72-22 to clarify that the personnel lapse portion would continue, so that activity can be continued. And the third way would be just to do complete new legislation that would speak to this matter. And my recollection from the last meeting, which was about 3 weeks ago now, is the most logical choice is to do the new legislation. And I recall that the Chief Legislative Counsel and her staff were the ones who were going to draft that legislation. And actually, they were supposed to have produced a draft before now, but we haven't seen it. I haven't seen it. I don't know if controllers heard anything more about it, but the important thing is that it needs to be done on a time track that's similar to the onset of the budget process. Because quite frankly, the BIM and some of the numbers that would be reflected in the budget legislation, if it were done like now, leading up to the June 20th meeting, it's as if the personnel lapse will be there. So, Mr. Delegate Slater, that's the answer.
Thank you, Mr. Vial. Vice Chair Slater, do you have a follow-up question?
Thank you, Chair Edu. So as it stands right now, the personal lapse savings fund monies would go to UFB.
Yes.
Chair, I had another question that was separate from this.
Okay. I'm gonna recognize, for the record, Delegate Lombardo Azra is on the call. He's currently present to the meeting. And also, I believe we also, or I'll do that later. Should the delegate represent questions?
Deja, thank you. I do have a question regarding the fixed costs. So if the budget allocations are being completed, there has been challenges in the past with fixed costs. And in looking at the UUFB request, there was a request for rental in the UUFB, which should go under fixed costs. What's the status on that, Mr. Vial, in terms of how the different departments are being trained on what should go under the fixed cost, and how are we making sure items that are not covered under the fixed cost language will not be included? If you could give us that update, thank you.
Mr. Vial.
Committee members speaking to the question posed by Delegate Karate. The fiscal year 23 listing of programs, entities, and business units who receive fixed costs currently includes a number of them for office rentals, for Tax Commission, Human Resources Commission, Navajo Utah Commission, DED. Those were funded in this year's budget. So when we start the fixed cost budgeting, those entities, as well as everything else that qualifies for fixed costs, they're informed to submit their budget requests. So, and what we do, OMB, we work with the current budget allocations compare it to their expenditures, and then any IDC allocations, some of them do get IDC. And then in an effort to arrive at a reasonable figure, reasonable amounts, those various budgets. So typically that's how it's done. And as I explained a bit earlier, because the entire fixed cost as a group, as a total, is taken off the top, that's why we have to take some time, some due diligence to go through it and try to pinpoint it as best we can. Now, having said that, one of the tricky areas that some of you are aware of is always going to be retirement. Retirement, their request is typically going to be, like today, they're asking for 25 million. That's quite a bit of money. Now, in this year's budget, they're funded at 7.5 million, which is a combination of 5 million from the general fund and then 2.5 million from the personal lapse. Together, that's 7.5. So that's typically, and again, it's the same way. They're asking for a large amount compared to the funding that's available. So as an example, if we were to fund at 25 million, that means everyone else below the fixed cost group would have to be reduced one way or another in order to accommodate that kind of increase. So anyway, the office rentals that are funded this year, they've submitted again, and so they'll be considered in the 24 budget allocations.
Thank you, Mr. Beal. Should I delegate Amber, Councilor Carter, do you have any follow-up questions?
Yeah, actually, I do, Shadija. So, the budget and finance, did we assign a committee member to the retirement committee?
We have 2 committees.
And so are we gonna receive updates on what's being talked at, or what's being discussed at the retirement committee meetings? Now, this is my first time hearing about the $25 million request.
It was a part of the orientation as well. The retirement office, when they came before the committee, they presented their fixed costs request to the committee.
Okay, so tell me more.
The fixed cost goes into the way that they, their plan of how they're going to, because there's another topic that's before the retirement plan committee is the merge from principal, who they were using and what the future looks like for the nation, because there's no commitment to the future of what the retirement, how the retirement is going to, I guess, what software, what company is going to continue to house retirement for the future. So that's a discussion that's going to happen at the next RPAC meeting. But all the I know Ms. Nakay also sends out to the committee when the RPAC meetings are happening as well. And actually, RPAC does provide, when we go into the meetings, all of the budget and finance committee members they print out packets for everybody. So welcome to come to the RPAC meeting.
So what's the 25 million for?
I'm gonna ask Ms. Andrea, we could ask directly from Ms. Andrea Holmes what that dollar amount is for. Is anyone from retirement on the call?
So maybe, yeah, maybe she could just send that, and if it's in the packet as a summary, then.
Okay.
Just identify
So
what
that's what
it's
the
at.
I missed that. So the 25 is for,
Mr. Daniel, I don't know. Retirement. Well, but also, could we get Ms. Holmes?
No, we don't have to right now. We just talked about that. She could just explain it, send a summary.
because, I'm sure.
Vice Chair Sutter?
Yeah, so there was, let's see here. The legislation that was passed. And then there was the orientation, And then there was another time, I know, where they presented before the committee. That was a report. And I don't remember any mention of 25 million being included in the fixed cost budget, so.
I remember that last day of the retirement office, but anyways,
They
Yeah, the
asked
last
for
one was
about
just us
15
three.
million last year,
Yeah,
and
so
that's
it's
how they
really,
got the 7 right?
okay,
They asked for 15 million last year.
let's, just stay on today's, we'll figure out the costs for the 25 million, we'll get that, a written report to the committee, to explain the dollar amount. Yes, Mr. Vidal?
Appreciate it, thank you.
Delegate Parrish, I can inform you about this. All of the fixed cost budgets are under your oversight. So when you have your budget hearings, you'll hear all about it. The retirement, the details about it. That's when they'll explain why they want 25 million and why they're only funded partially in a given year.
Thank you.
And
Yeah.
now that Delegate Damon is here, he's familiar with the subject.
That's your second?
thank you. Do you have an update on preliminary external funds cash match amount?
Mr. Vidal?
Delegate Slater, we do have some numbers. Unfortunately, I didn't bring it with me at this moment. But I can say is that it went down somewhat, which is good news. So that the cash match is being met from prior year's funding, commitments and obligations, the balance remaining as well compared to the expected need for 24.
Thank you, Mr. Vidal. Members of the Budget and Finance Committee, do we have any other questions in regards to the report? Anyone
Would you
else?
say, Speaker?
They don't need 25 million. The only reason why they're asking for that was because of the amount of money. If you remember on the last year when they did their quarterly report in DC, for the whole year of 2020, they lost everything they gained. So they went from 110% down to 89% full funded of the whole retirement plan.
Now we're like 100.
So now we're back up to over 110% again. So it fluctuates. That's why I always have stated the stance that
Okay.
it's the market that fluctuates. So they were asking for that money when they were back down to 89%, but we knew that the stock market was going to come back. So and it did. So now it's back to 100, over 106, I think, the other morning.
I think though, that I mean, 89% is still a nice threshold. It's better than any of the surrounding states.
Way better.
And so I think they keep coming at it. I guess I appreciate their enthusiasm, but if we're giving them money and they're losing it, and I mean, it's gonna come back, whatever, I think there just needs to be a discussion. And who's ever on the retirement committee, I don't know how you're expressing that, but I'll just keep expressing that on the committee that we've been going through this the last 8 years, and I think the surrounding states were like in a pretty solid position. We probably shouldn't ask for additional dollars unless we hit like significant loss or something.
Thank you, committee members. Do you have any other questions for Mr. Vidal?
I just want to say for the record, because I heard on the way over, Metro, that I'm sure part of your thought or your question about the fixed cost. I just want to let the committee know that I am working with, well, I haven't got a response from the Division of Community Development, but I am working with the Department of Agriculture and, I'm working with the Department of Agriculture to fund the land board grazing and farm board stipends to put that into the fixed costs. And then the other one is, the supplemental fund as per the request from Mr. Vial in his memo during the summer youth employment for the $3 million to put that into the fixed cost as well. The only one I haven't got a response back, you know how every year sometimes, well, every year we have to deal with the shortfall for the chapter stipends too, but I haven't got a response yet from the Vision Community Development on that.
That's on fixed cost then.
How is it? Okay.
Can you
Okay.
answer that?
So, but the other,
Right, the farm board, grazing,
Yeah.
and land board.
Yeah.
So three,
those two, and then some reason,
and so on. It's part of fixed cost.
is that just from the recommendation from Mr. Vial on his last memo?
Thank you.
You should put Dalton in there as fixed cost.
Members of Budget and Finance, do we have any other questions?
I'm gonna do it this.
I hear none. For the record, we also have Delegate So on the call, and then Chair Eugenia Charles Newton on the call as well. I believe, because I'm gonna ask for a third call, if any of the committee members have any questions for Mr. Vial on his report today. There are no more questions from the Budget and Finance Committee. I'll extend the time to Chair Eugenia Charles Newton to ask a question.
Thank you, Chair Parrish. I hope that you all can hear me clearly. I'm listening in on the Budget and Finance Committee because as chair, I always try to keep the committee apprised with upcoming dates that are that we're going to be looking at in terms of budget. So I appreciate Vice Chair Slater sending me the report that was sent by Mr. Vial. This does provide some information to the Law and Order Committee in terms of what to expect. I did have a question. I know that you did talk a little bit about the three options for the personnel lapse fund. And then quite honestly, I always have to go back to the BIM booklet, to remind myself the process when it comes to the personnel lapse fund. But I wanted to know how does the personnel lapse fund affect, or does it even affect public safety? And I asked this question because we're trying to be, I guess, maybe creative in the ways of hiring more law enforcement. And I don't know, if the way that the rules are written right now, whether that affects law enforcement. And I say that because technically law enforcement does have our 638 contracts that are in place, but we also use general funds to supplement the law enforcement, the personnel. Not only, law enforcement that's covered by 638, but there's also civilian positions that are also open. So I guess that's my first question. My second question is, I know that a few years ago, maybe Speaker Damon can help me with this, but I know a few years ago, there was questions of chapters and the way that the rules were written in the BIM booklet. And then that was, apparently that section was removed, but it was very helpful to a lot of delegates. And I know that this conversation came up in 2019 as a brand new delegate. I wasn't really sure what the discussion was, and I did try looking back into the old BIM booklets. So can I get a little bit of information on what used to be included for chapters in the BIM booklet, but is no longer there, and whether that would be considered for this new BIM booklet? Thank you, Chair Parrish.
Thank you, Chair Eugenia Charles Newton, for posing your questions today. And I'm just gonna brush back over the report that Mr. Vial gave, and then also give the time over to either Mr. Vial, and then we also have Mr. McCabe here, if they can offer any answers to the question that you posed. But in the report, as you mentioned, Vice Chair Slater forwarded to you, in B, it's in regards to the personal lapse, and currently the resolution CD 7222 that prevents the use of personal lapse. So that's part of the report today, in trying to offer to the committee some solutions in how we can make sure that some of the programs as you've identified, and also in the retirement office, that we can continue to provide those services. So I just want to make that clarification that that is an issue right now that the committee has to address as soon as possible, or a member of the council is going to address as soon as possible. And then we can continue, I guess, to move forward with the questions that you posed. So Mr. Vial, if you could offer any answers to the questions.
Committee members, Chair Parrish, and speaking to Delegate Charles Newton, I don't have Division of Public Safety's budget detail with me at the moment. So therefore, all I can say in general is that if any of the programs in Division of Public Safety are funded by general funds, which are used for personnel, then they would be affected accordingly. Now, as Delegate Charles Newton mentioned, the majority of their funding is federal funding, BIA law enforcement, and so forth. But there may be some that are funded by the general fund. But I don't have those specific numbers with me at the moment. Now, her question about if there's a section on chapters on the BIM, in the BIM, the answer is yes. And Delegate Charles Newton may be referring to about 3 years ago or so, there was a very short chapter in the BIM that referred to chapters. But subsequently, since then, with the formation of the chapters unit in DOJ, they've worked on a more substantive document that has all the chapter budgeting rules, policies, and procedures. And as of last year, and it would be maintained in the 24 BIM, that section is continued. Delegate Charles Newton, I hope that answers your question. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vial. Chair Eugenia Charles Newton, do you have a follow-up question?
Yes, well, not necessarily a follow-up question. Chair Parrish, Mr. Bial, that did answer my questions. I will have to look back at the chapter from 3 years ago. Chair Parrish, as you all know, there was a legislation passed during the 24th Navajo Nation Council regarding carryovers. How will the new legislation affect what is happening right now, and how are you guys going to address that in the bill? Because looking back at the 2023 under Exhibit C, it does say on number 4 that the branch chiefs recommend unexpended fiscal year 2022 fund balances to be carried over fiscal year 2023. So with that new legislation passed that requires, I believe, 19 delegates to vote in favor of carryovers, how will
Chair Eugenia Charles Newton, you cut out.
I'm sorry, where did I cut out at?
I believe the last sentence you were saying.
Oh, I just questioned Chair Parrish in 2023 BIM booklet under Exhibit C. If you go down to number 4, it addresses the carryovers. But we, during the 24th Navajo Nation Council, there was a legislation passed regarding carryovers. And so I just wanted to know how Budget and Finance was going to address the carryovers, and then also how that was going to reflect within the BIM booklet. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Eugene and Charles Newton. The enabling legislation CD 7222 prevents all carryover, all carryover. So I guess to answer the question, the committee, as Mr. Bial was giving the report today, the report that he's given to the committee twice now, and how Mr. Melrodas from the Department of Justice is asking and saying that this is a problem because it's affecting certain funding sources. So personal lapse is the consideration that we have to make that modification through legislation to continue carryover for personal lapse for programs like the retirement program, as Mr. Bial had mentioned. But I guess the last clarification that I'll ask Mr. Bial to make before we as a committee will vote on the report is maybe, Mr. Bial, can you also identify other programs that are affected by the lack of carryover, or the prevention of carryover through this legislation in personal lapse that you know of?
What if you look at DOJ question?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Speaking to your question and to a concern or question raised by Delegate Charles Newton. Delegate Parrish, you're right when you refer to the resolution that discourages, maybe that's a better word I should have used, discourages general fund carryovers. The reason I use that word now, or explaining it a little differently, is that it can be waived still, but it's a 7/8 vote of the council. So that's like 21 votes of the 24 would be required to allow it. And threshold obviously has been increased in order to discourage it as much as possible. Now, the carryover matter, again, as Delegate Damon and Crotty know, some years it was extensive, some years not very much. And in one year, about 4 years ago, if I recall accurately, there was no carryovers at all. And it was the Budget and Finance Committee at the time who made that determination. Let's not do any carryovers, because it was their understanding in part that, well, why do we reward programs or business units who didn't spend their money? We just give it back to them again. So it wasn't fixing any problem. It's really just giving an extra dollar on top of their regular annual allocation. So it's ranged, but with that new resolution, it is very much discouraged, so that is brought under more control or better control. And it takes a 7/8 vote of the council to waive or allow any carryover at this time. So the personnel lapse prohibition, if it stands, the way it's been interpreted by some of our lawyers, is it would affect literally every general fund program who has personnel costs and expenses, because the funding potentially might not be there unless it's remedied, as I said, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Bial. Thank you, Chair Eugene Charles Newton and Delegate So for being with the Budget and Finance Committee today. We look forward to continuing the discussion, and it sounds like there's movement in trying to mitigate the challenge that's before us, so thank you. Ms. Nelson, can you take today's roll call vote to accept the report? And for the record, Vice Chair Slater votes green on the report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Sure, roll call vote on accepting the report. Honorable Norman M. Gay, how do you vote? Honorable Norman M. Gay. Honorable Amber Kenneth Body, how do you vote?
The committee, I vote green.
Thank you, David. Honorable Amber Kenneth Body votes green. Honorable Carl Slater votes green. Honorable Seth David, how do you vote?
I vote green.
Thank you. Honorable Seth David votes green. Mario Aseret, how do you vote?
Green.
Thank you. Mario Aseret votes green. Madam Chair, we have 4 members voting in the affirmative, 0 opposing. Madam Chair not voting, and 1 member not voting.
Sure. Thank you, Ms. Nelson, for taking the roll call vote. Thank you, Mr. Rial, for your time this morning, and we look forward to continuing working with you. And we wish you all the luck during preparing all the budgeting material for all of the divisions and working the entire nation. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, let's move on to 5B, the overview of the history of the Phoenix Indian Center Fund presented by Mr. Sean McCabe. I believe I was on the phone with Ms. Nagpay when we were setting up the agenda, but this 5B was to speak to the issue that members of the Health, Education, and Human Services, and also the legislation in regards to the Navigation's obligation to pay into Diné College, National Prep, and also the Phoenix Indian Center as well. So I know it says Phoenix Indian Center specifically, but Mr. McCabe, this time is yours to kind of give an overview to the committee on the challenges that you've come into in regards to this topic.
Great, thank you, Madam Chair, Kehat, Shinata, and members of the Budget and Finance Committee. So I'll start by addressing the specific, well, I'll start by giving you an overview, and I think we spoke a lot about it at the work session this morning about some of the issues with these funds that have been set aside in the general fund as Navajo Nation grants, et cetera, to, in particular, Navajo Tech, Diné College, Phoenix Indian Center, and Navajo Prep. Some of them, the lapses on the funding and the reason why there is no funding or they've been denied funding were administrative issues. But I think a lot of the issues that we came across, we discussed this morning, and I'm hoping we have a plan to start changing some of the process. You know, as mentioned, it's hard to keep telling programs, you know, we're understaffed, and that's the reason why critical services aren't being funded for our people, particularly in the way of education with NTU or Diné College, Phoenix Indian Center, et cetera. So I'm hoping after our discussion this morning and the ideas that I've come up with and that we will formulate for BNF to consider, we'll be able to streamline this and make it more automatic, if you will. And again, just trying to be more efficient, do things better. We're not necessarily doing things wrong, we could just do them a little bit better. And that way, the resources that sit at the Office of the Controller can be dispersed to their intended use. Again, in particular, this matter of Phoenix Indian Center, NTU, and Diné College, but you know, all programs. Again, I think we've run into a lot of process issues that we talked about in detail this morning that I think we can tweak here and there, and really in an effort to increase efficiency, but also maintain accountability, you know, the integrity of the office and transparency. So I think there's some pretty easy fixes, at least in the beginning, that I would like to present and talk to BNF about and get their support. I think we're still trying to navigate what level that needs to go to, if it can be, you know, just internal management changes, or if it actually has to be some kind of a approval by BNF or even the full council. But I'll be presenting my ideas like we mentioned this morning in the next meeting, really to try and undo the bottleneck, right? That these resources can get to the intended use a lot quicker than they do. And that doesn't just include grants like this, but also, you know, payroll, vendor payments, et cetera. I mean, I think we've mentioned many times that we can talk economic development all day long, but if we can't get the little things right, like getting money in, money out, then we can't really accomplish the bigger goals either. So we need to start with the little things and fix those and move forward. So, but we talked about those in detail this morning, so I don't think I need to rehash that very much. But to get to the specific question and specific presentation having to do with the Phoenix Indian Center. So this was a little bit different than the NTU and Dene College issue. This one actually came down to a default in payment from the Collier. To just give some background, this was to be funded by by a family called the Colliers, and they were to provide money and even an exchange of land for the Phoenix Indian School, and it was that money that was supposed to, the interest from that money was supposed to be used to give the Phoenix Indian Center roughly $148,000 a year for supplemental funding. Between 2014 and 2018, the Collier, I'm just going to call it the Collier Foundation, defaulted on their payment, and it went to settlement. And so the result of that settlement was Collier was to pay $16 million in cash, and the sale of the Indian School property would be placed into a trust fund as principal. That would not be available for use until it reached $34.9 million maturity. And then at that time, the investment income could be used for use by the Phoenix Indian Center. So these settlement pots were held in the Baron Collier settlement account on our side. The prior controller did make the decision, I mean Ms. Kirk, she was given the option to transfer the nation's portion, which is 5% of the cash settlement, to that account, and she did it. And since that, she did do it. At that time, we have paid out three different $148,000, 325 drawdowns to the Phoenix Indian Center. But what's up for question now is the remaining balance of that settlement. There's a reconciliation that my office did before I got here. But what was determined is the Phoenix Indian Center from that settlement is still owed a full 2022 allocation of $148,325, which is the recurring amount, and then a partial $42,054 payment for 2023, and that would exhaust the settlement amount. Right now, it's kind of stuck in that lapse to the UUFB. And so I know Dr. Andy Nez, Delegate Dr. Andy Nez, has been working to try and free up this money through a UUFB request, which I think the position of the Office of the Controller is probably the best route because that's where it lapsed to anyway. But I think this is another discussion that we discussed this morning where we need to get a better understanding of the general fund balance, what is actually restricted and what is unrestricted, unreserved, which is UUFB. Because money like this is really set aside for a restricted reason and shouldn't automatically lapse to UUFB. So I think that's just one of the processes change that we need to talk about and see what we can do to make sure these things don't happen again. Because it's not just Phoenix Indian Center that got affected for this 148 allocation, $148,000 allocation, but also 42,000 for 2023. It was NTU who also missed out on a full year of 4.2, I believe it was, or 4.7. Dene College missed out on partial 2022 of 1.2, and then another full year of 4.2. So we're talking $10 million just for those two. And they've come before Hess and had a work session with Doty and members of this committee saying they were not able to provide student services to the tune of that money because of this, really what came down to administrative issue. It sounds like we had some issues during the transition of the last administration and a deadline got missed, and as a result, those monies also reverted back to UUFB, and now it looks like we're going to have to do a UUFB request. And I think Dr. Nez, Delegate Dr. Nez, is working on that now. So that's it in a nutshell. So there is a resolution. There was I know Jimmy from my office did a presentation to a Doty call we had on this very issue last Thursday that I was present at the education building, and he did show, I think, a resolution where we committed to paying this out, because we were funding this until the settlement was in place through UUFB supplemental funding. So I think that's the route that's going to be taken this time, to catch them up and exhaust the settlement amount, which again is the FY '22 allocation of 148,325, which is a full year allocation, and then an FY '23 balance of roughly $42,000. So the history on this one's a little bit different than NTU and Diné College, in that there was actually an outside funding source through the Collier family, which eventually defaulted between the years of 2014, 2018, but we did receive a settlement. And my understanding is we did obligate those funds to Phoenix Indian Center, and then the cash settlement would actually reimburse us when that was done. So that's the basic history for this. As we discussed this morning on our work session, NTU, again, Diné College is a little bit different, but I think we're working on solutions to try and get that better handled in the future, including the consideration of Ford-funded grants. I mean, I think we could do that if that's something we need to go through council legislation, and still require them to do the quarterly reporting that's required now under cash reimbursement. And also, it's always an option in the grant agreement to have it audited every year, even though it's not federal funds, which wouldn't fall in the Single Audit Act necessarily. We could still write in the grant agreement to make sure that the grant money was spent in compliance with Navajo Nation grant requirements, that it is part of the annual audit, even though it probably wouldn't qualify under the Single Audit Act. So just things to consider to try and prevent issues like this going forward. It seems like issues like this take a lot of time, and there's really some pretty easy solutions that I think we can all make and make sure these funds get out where they're supposed to be. So with that, Madam Chair, Parish committee members, I'm open for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Beal. Members of Budget and Finance, do we have a motion to accept today's report? Legislative Delegate Amber Canesco Crowdy, motion. Do we have a second? Speaker Beeman, second the motion. Okay. Members of Budget and Finance Committee, do you have any questions from the controller? Vice Chair Sitter?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Controller. I feel like this is the same report that I've received for like the last 2 years when I've tried to look into this and figure out how we can continue to secure funding for the Phoenix Indian Center. I think the other item was that, and this is where I want your confirmation, that this was handled under Doty too.
Yeah.
And I'd like to know who is working at Doty on this, or who are you working with over there? And have they developed a proposal on trying to match within not the matching fund, but either fixed costs or having a fixed set aside from the Navajo Nation budget to support the Phoenix Indian Center? Like, what is the proposal to move forward? Because in the past, it's like, well, we need to finish out the reconciling, do some more legal research, and essentially it seems like it's the same outcome now. So is there going to be anything new proposed for this budget that's coming up for fiscal year '24? And are you taking the lead on that, or is Doty going to be taking the lead on that?
Thank you, Vice Chair Slater. Mr. McKee?
Thank you, Madam Chair, Speaker, Vice Chair Slater for the question. So I think the immediate response, or the immediate goal, is to get them paid through what they're already owed. And we have worked with Doty. And so the way this was set up was it was a Navajo Nation set aside that was a grant through Doty to Phoenix Indian Center, which frankly complicated the matter even more. However, we have worked with them on, and we're working with them to solve this issue of getting them paid back. It looks like right now the only avenue to get that done is through a UUFB request. I had thought that maybe this was already encumbered on our side, and that therefore just an updated grant agreement was needed. But in this particular case, it looks like we're gonna have to go through the UFB request that you guys will probably have to consider at the council level. Now, moving forward, my thought would be that Doe be the one to take the lead on the ongoing grant agreement with Phoenix Indian Center. It has been suggested, I think, at some level that why can't we just make this a direct grant to the Phoenix Indian Center and maybe take Doty out as the middleman? I'm not trying to rock the boat, but that is certainly something we can talk about through legal counsel, et cetera. But for the status quo as it sits right now, my answer would be that Doty would have to figure out probably the grant funding going forward, since this is a grant through them, to the Phoenix Indian Center. But my office can work with them on that and identifying funds, et cetera.
Thank you, Mr. McCabe. Vice Chair Slater has a follow-up question.
Thank you. So in terms of outstanding payments and obligations, I think the nation always says, to the extent that funding is available, the contract or grant will be fulfilled. And just because something was set aside doesn't mean that it automatically, it's supposed to, right? But doesn't mean that it can be held against the nation in future years if it wasn't actually pushed forward. So what have you calculated to be the nation's obligation, and what years would that cover? Is it only 11 through 13, or are we also including these 21 and 22 amounts? I guess, can you clarify precisely what the dollar amount is that's estimated and what years that would cover?
Thank you, Vice Chair Slater. And before we turn the time over to Mr. McCabe, I believe Mr. Willie's also on the line. Mr. McCabe, if you
Oh.
just say for him.
Okay. Again, thank you, Madam Chair Parrish, and Vice Chair Slater, for your question. So the amount that's owed is $148,325 for fiscal '22, and then $42,054 for fiscal '23. And what that does is it exhausts the settlement amount. So once that's done, it's pretty much done, and then we'd have to figure out the funding source going forward. And the way that settlement worked is there was a mechanism in place where the Navajo Nation forward funded it, and the settlement then reimbursed it. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. McCabe. Vice Chair Slater, do you have any questions?
I just have one more follow-up, and that is, I think there's two fund management plan legislations. Let me go back here. Or there's one fund management plan, but two legislations, the BFN 9400 and BFL 13802. Are you working with anyone to either amend or delete those from existence and then create a set aside or anything to that effect?
Sorry.
Mr. McCabe.
Yeah, sorry. Again, thank you. Right now, I haven't had that discussion, but certainly can, yeah.
Thank you, Mr. McCabe. Members of the Budget and Finance Committee, do you have any further questions? Second call. Third call. I hear none. Ms. Nelson, can you take today's roll call vote to accept today's report from the controller?
Yes, Madam Chair, roll call vote, accepting the report. Honorable Norman Imbegay, how do you vote? Honorable Norman Imbegay, how do you vote? Honorable Amber Kenneth-Bakati, how do you vote?
Sorry, I will agree.
Thank you. Today's Honorable Amber Kenneth-Bakati votes green. Honorable Carl Slater, how do you vote?
Green.
Thank you. Honorable Carl Slater votes green. Honorable Seth Damon, how do you vote?
I will agree.
Thank you. Honorable Seth Damon votes green. Mardo Esseret, how do you vote?
Green.
Thank you. Mardo Esseret votes green. Madam Chair, we have 4 members voting in the affirmative, 0 opposing. Madam Chair not voting, and 1 member not voting. Madam Chair?
Thank you, Ms. Nelson, and thank you, Mr. McCabe, for being with us today. Thank you also for the members of the Office of the Controller for also being online today as well. Thank you.
I'll be available for the legislation if you need me, but
Okay.
I'm gonna head back to my.
Great, thank you. Let's move on to item 6, old business, none. Item 7, we do not have, old business. We do have new business today. We're gonna move on to item 7. And it appears I am the sponsor for both of the legislation. So I will hand the gavel over to Vice Chair Slater.
Thank you, Chair. We're on 7A legislation 11623, an action related to the Budget and Finance Committee approving and establishing the committee's priorities for the 4-year term of the 25th Nomination Council, sponsored by Shenandoah Parish Council delegate. Committee members, do we have a motion?
Motion.
Committee members, do we have a second? Thank you. Staff, can you please read the legislation? Has it already been electronically read into the record? If it's already been read, then we don't need to read it again. So I just read the title of the legislation, putting that into the record in advance. And committee members, do we have any questions or desired presentation from Chair Parrish?
I don't need a presentation, I have a question.
Okay. Committee members, are there any other committee members who would desire a presentation of the legislation? Hearing none, Chair Parrish, I'll leave it at your discretion as to whether you'd like to provide a preface, and then we can go to Delegate Crowley to ask your question.
Thank you, Vice Chair Slater, and thank you, members of the Budget and Finance Committee. It's good to be with everyone this morning. Today, I'll give you an overview. The legislation was drafted with one exhibit. In Exhibit 1, it is an document that was presented before the Budget and Finance Committee last month, and at the time, it was just a document for consideration for the committee, and it was voted on, and then from there, it became, I took the document and then created legislation, but I'm sure if you have questions or amendments to the legislation, this is your committee, and we can continue the discussion on the priorities. I guess that's my preface at this time, Vice Chair Slater.
Thank you, Chair. Delegate Crowley, you recognized?
Thank you. Appreciate it. Yeah, Shadeja for sponsoring the legislation. I have a question for clarification on Exhibit 1. So overall priorities, it says eliminate earmarks. What mentions that in the legislation, page 202, line 7? Can you just give a clarification on exactly what does that mean? Thank you.
Chair Parrish, you recognized?
Thank you, Shedda, Delegate Amber Kness-Bakrati. So when we were developing the priorities earlier this year, the committee, each committee member identified priorities that they deemed feasible in our tenure as the Budget and Finance Committee. And from that point, we had a work session, then compiled every committee member's priorities into one Excel sheet, and then from there, themes from all of the compiled priorities from each of the committee members, themes were identified. So several of the committee members identified procurement reform, appropriation reform, prioritizing funding based on ROI, eliminating earmarks, and identifying an act of revenue streams. So there are themes that were identified among the priorities presented by the committee. However, if that's not the correct language, I feel that it is important to make the amendment to reflect what the committee desires. Thank you, Vice Chair Slater.
Thank you. Delegate Crowley, you have a follow-up?
My only follow-up is, just help me remember, what committee member, or what was the suggestion around eliminating the parks?
So I'm sharing right now, I can answer the question from committee Lance will permit me to answer, because I was the one who put that on there, but if you want me to hand it over to someone else to answer the question. Committee members? Okay. If you remember, that's a stupid way to start the question, I know the answer. The purpose was to do data-driven, performance-driven budgeting. And so instead of just scattershot appropriations, focus on like priority listings, need, planning, things that don't rely on, say, a deal between a delegate and the president to have it advance across the finish line and move through the council, but instead, an example would be, Doug, if I know you brought up, not necessarily the unmet needs, but like with rises in costs for some of these capital outlay projects that the nation has funded, how are we gonna actually accomplish that? And how do we prioritize funding those to see them come to a reality with these outstanding BTF system projects or ones that are funded through the state? So that was the intention behind that statement there. And I'll put my chair hat on, the vice chair hat on.
So it means data-driven decision-making.
Yeah,
That's the
and I think,
okay, as long as I know the intent.
committee members, are there further questions or discussion on legislation 116-23? Hearing none, let's proceed to a vote on the legislation. There's no amendments, so we don't need to read it again. Ms. Nelson, can you do a vote for us?
Yes, Vice Chair Slater will call the vote. Referring to the legislation, Honorable Norman M. Gay has a vote. Honorable Norman M. Gay, Honorable Anthony Guapari had a vote.
I'll go for each other.
Thank you, David. Honorable Anthony Guapari votes green. Honorable Shanti Paris had a vote.
I agree.
Thank you. Honorable Shanti Paris votes green. Honorable Seth Damon had a vote.
I vote green.
Thank you. Honorable Seth Damon votes green. Mario Essert had a vote.
Green.
Thank you. Mario Essert votes green. Vice Chair, we have 4 members voting in the affirmative or opposing. Vice Chair not voting and one member not voting. Vice Chair?
Thank you. Committee members, will move on to item B, legislation 117-23. An action relating to the Budget and Finance Committee appointing delegate members from the Budget and Finance Committee to the Navajo Transitional Energy Company LLC as a member representative, the Navajo Development Corporation as a shareholder representative, the Navajo Times Publishing Company as a shareholder representative, Navajo Community Development Financial Institution as a shareholder representative, and to the Navajo Nation Oil and Gas Corporation as a shareholder representative, sponsored by Shandin Parish Council Delegate. Committee members, do we have a motion and a second? Going twice? Motion. Chair recognizes a motion, the Vice Chair recognizes a motion from Delegate Damon. Is there a second? Is there a second, committee members?
Okay, I can second.
Yeah, you're left. Just second from Chair Parrish. Ms. Nakai, has this legislation been read into the record?
Yes.
Thank you. Committee members, are there questions or discussion on legislation 117-23? Any questions or discussion? Hearing none, Ms. Nelson, can you please do a roll call vote on 117-23?
Sure, Vice Chair, I will call vote on legislation number 0117-23. Honorable Norman M. Gay, how do you vote? Honorable Norman M. Gay, how do you vote?
How do you vote?
How do you vote? Honorable Norman M. Gay, how do you vote for this? Okay, thank you.
I'm voting for.
Honorable Norman M. Gay votes green. Honorable Amber Kenneth Bakari, how do you vote?
Legislation.
Red. Thank you. Honorable Amber Kenneth Carty votes red. Honorable Shanti Perez, how do you vote?
I vote green.
Thank you. Honorable Shanti Perez votes green. Honorable Seth Damon, how do you vote?
Agree.
Thank you. Honorable Seth Damon votes green. Martin Aseret, how do you vote?
Green.
Thank you. Martin Aseret votes green. Vice Chairman, we have 4 members voting in the affirmative, 1 opposing. Vice Chairman not voting. Vice Chairman.
Thank you, Celso.
Thank you, Vice Chair Slater, for chairing the Budget and Finance Committee through the legislation today. Thank you, committee members, for the action you've taken on the legislation. Let's move on to the next item of new business, which is new item C, which is scheduling the next meetings for the Budget and Finance Committee. The items are scheduling the work session with the FRF office for June and July. Also, let's start with that first, and then we'll go into each of the items after that. So with the Fiscal Recovery Fund office, we have not met with them in 2 weeks. So my question to the committee is, what days are committee members available for the month of June to meet with the Fiscal Recovery Fund office?
Do we know, is the nomination off on Monday the 19th?
Yes.
Yes? Juneteenth?
Oh, is that the one you wanted?
No, I thought that was.
No, I think didn't Eugene say?
No, yeah, I think Eugene, so, no, that was the one, where me and Hale took away holiday.
I did. I did on
And then Olin came back and he was in.
26.
I'm free that day.
26 of June.
Okay, 26 then, are you good, Madam Chair?
At 1?
26? We haven't met with the fiscal.
I call my calendar big birthday. What day? 26?
That's cool.
I'm good. What time?
10.
Okay.
No, the Saturday morning stuff killing me. 10?
Is
You're on a call till 12 o'clock. What are you talking about?
There was a big war going on, unfortunately.
is the committee, does the committee feel like 3 weeks, I think it would be 6 weeks in between our last meeting with the Fiscal Recovery Fund office and then the 26th? Is 6 weeks, is that, because the last time we talked to the Fiscal Fund Recovery Office, he, Mr. Platero mentioned that by the next meeting that we have, he would have further recommendations for the procurement changes.
Okay, I know what you're saying. That's what we're waiting for.
Which we could have, because the committee didn't schedule any meetings this week or next week with Mr. Placero, then we weren't able to receive all of the information he was able to gather.
So how about the 20th? Or is that still too far out for you?
I think a little bit too far. I was thinking, within the next,
The
before the
leadership
16th.
20th, right?
Okay,
Yeah. Regular committee meeting.
I have a question.
Okay.
Just going back to your thought, I know that, so I thought today with, Sean McCabe was gonna give us a presentation on his thoughts on the procurement recommendation. So is he gonna come back on the 20th then?
Yes.
Okay, so we're gonna have recommendations on the 20th from Sean McCabe?
He said a month.
He actually said a month. So this morning during the leadership meeting, both OMB and OOC are gonna come back the first week of July.
Oh,
with
okay.
those recommendations.
Right, so if even if Tom Terrell comes back within the next 2 weeks, we still have to give his recommendations to Department of Justice and okay.
That's, yeah, we're gonna discuss this.
at least with
We're not,
with
we're
the
not
momentum,
addressing future
with the
schedules.
momentum that the budget and finance committee was meeting with the Supreme Fund office, we could then present those back to the Department of Justice. And so, just, that was kind of my train of thought when trying to meet with the fiscal fund recovery office.
So what day are you proposing?
Let's see, I know it's the sixth, is there any time before June 23rd the committee can meet?
4/23?
What's your earliest date? And I could just
The 14th, maybe?
ask for it.
I can do 14th.
We're in Alamo for the Eastern on 23rd.
Yeah.
Oh, shoot,
Yeah.
14th?
14th?
How about the 14th?
I'm open on 14th.
You're not good on the 14th?
I'm good on 14th.
Let's do,
I'll be at the Veterans Advisory Council giving their recommendations on Carl legislation and the 50/50 formula.
How about the 12th? Monday, the 12th?
I think I'm meeting,
Is this a leadership meeting?
let's see, it's for, I'm not.
Leadership.
We could do we have Navi on the 15th? We do, great.
No, that would be the third.
Speaking of future legislation.
Then our
Policy.
schedule for that, whoever puts on the schedule, they got it messed up too, because they have our BNF on the 22nd too.
These guys did that, so I sent
Communications.
emails telling them that that's incorrect, that it's wrong.
Thursday.
I don't know where they got their information.
How about the 13th?
The Veterans-
Code says
I was
that
just thinking
they're-
meeting with Bobby Baldwin, and she said it's on the 14th.
I have an email from,
How's your
Tim
13th?
Johnson saying it's.
From sun up to sundown.
You're busy on the 13th?
Let me go back to my.
You're busy on the 13th?
Yes.
Wow, okay.
Okay, so the next week.
All the way from 8 o'clock to 5 p.m.
Maybe me, at 8 o'clock in the morning, I'm calling.
No, the veteran.
I can't make it though. We're on the road and,
15th is Navi, right?
no, there's no Navi.
15th,
Eighth
15th and
is
16th is all in the Mexican delegation, and we have Caucus
We
meeting.
can,
All right, okay.
Oh. Okay, Norm, there's protesting.
the speaker has sent an email out about the economic summit
Backyard.
on the 22nd, we can go. We should go off record while we're having this discussion.
Hello, anybody there? Hello? Hello? Hello?
Chair Parrish, we can't hear anything that you guys are discussing.
Office, right?
Oh, we weren't even,
Delegate Azaritt? Delegate Azaritt?
Oh, one.
Hello? Finally.
Okay, we were like, where's Lamardo? Okay, Delegate Azaritt, how does June 14th at 1 PM work for your schedule to meet with the Fiscal Recovery Fund office at the Fiscal Fund Recovery office?
June 14th, I'm okay, but I got a meeting with INDOT on 9402 Road at 9.
Okay,
I'll be
okay,
there for one.
so Budget and Finance will schedule our next, is Mr. Blucher on this? Okay, we will work with, the Fiscal Fund Recovery Office. I do believe Mr. Platero extended the invitation for us to go to the office and see his magnificent whiteboard, so we will schedule, our next work session with the Fiscal Fund Recovery Office for June 14th at 1 PM. Okay. That June 14th, 1 PM, work session with FRF. Okay, this goes to another item, which is rescheduling the, don't think it's wrong. Okay, so scheduling June 20th meeting, I think this is pretty general, so I'm gonna ask the committee if this will also include rescheduling the meeting with the OPVP to the first week of July. Is that correct? What day in the first week of July? I guess before our regular meeting, right? For our first July regular meeting, we'll reschedule the OPVP leadership meeting.
we have the,
We have 4th of July, so we gotta.
Oh, we got
I would
rescheduled.
say, I would say Monday or Wednesday are free for me.
I'm okay with first July. Wait, okay.
But the staff have the day off. That's just an application program.
Okay, so, we scheduled FRF, let's go to then June 20th, and then, actually, before we go to June 20th, we need to do rescheduling of the July 4th.
That's what I'm saying, the third
Meeting.
or the fifth.
So committee members, July 3rd or July 5th work for everyone? If not, we can consider the following Tuesday. July 11th will be the next, will be the first.
Because that's usually when we have a special meeting anyways, because all the issues are gonna come through last minute, the last minute one's trying to make it a council session.
Third,
July 11th?
third. I'm open both ways, so I'm not that far down.
We said,
I can make it that far.
The July 4th.
Delegate Azaritt, does July 11th work for you?
July 3rd,
11th,
11th?
yes.
Let's see. No, I've got a personal appointment that day in Flagstaff. Very important. I'll let you know.
Okay.
How about the 3rd, like you said?
11th. 11th.
Well, maybe.
I would, if we're only gonna have one budget and finance committee meeting before council, then I'd suggest doing it later in the week, not earlier, if there's other legislations that need to be considered by our committee
How
before.
about the 10th?
Well, I'd say the 10th and the 12th.
I think,
I'm okay on the 10th.
I'd say the 12th.
How about the 12th, Councilor?
What day?
The 12th?
On the 12th?
I'm okay on the 12th.
Green light.
You have to remember that Hess has scheduled meetings on Wednesdays here, so we have to find a different location.
Is this the Budget and Finance Committee conference room?
They schedule Hess has it reserved for the year.
This is the Budget and Finance Committee.
Arm wrestle. But does the 12th work?
Well,
I'm good either the
On the
10th
10th?
or the 12th.
I just want to toss out to the committee that we will probably have a special session Tuesday at some time. There's other legislation that comes down the pipeline.
And how are you anticipating that affecting this?
I mean, if they have other legislations that, like, let's say, the legislation, because we're meeting on the 12th, has to go to RAC first, or go to SC first last minute, and then sometimes in the past, historically, there's been special budget finance committee meetings after that, so before that. So
don't we
it
have
might happen.
don't we have to also reschedule July 18th meeting too?
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying, like, we're only meeting once before
So why
it.
is this on there? Okay, that's.
How about on the June 30th, I'm open for anything. June 30th.
So how is, okay, what if the suggestion is then July 10th?
I'm open.
I'm fine with one.
I'm okay with the 10th.
I'm okay with July 11th.
I'm okay too, 11th.
Whatever.
What would you do?
Because the Chuck is kicking, I'm gonna kick you guys out.
I didn't have anything.
It was Mr. Everett.
Oh, it doesn't matter.
But you're open July 9th through the 12th,
Mine is a Sunday.
sorry. 10th.
Had like 5
Okay, so do we, I think we all agreed on the 12th, so let's just go with the 12th.
July 12th is the first July Budget and Finance Committee meeting. This also pulls us to our scheduled meeting, which is supposed to be July 18th. When can the committee after come back together for the next regular meeting?
The 25th?
For me,
25th for which one?
for the second BNF meeting.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll have the 12th and the 5th for our committee meetings.
25th.
You want
Sorry,
anything?
25th.
Inca, crunchy, giant corn.
All right, so we have our July
The
meeting.
budget schedule yet.
Okay, now I'm gonna try.
Dana?
Visual board of it.
So one of the things when the budget schedule is being developed, this year, for certain, one of the things that needs to be set aside is training for the committees. And you guys certainly have an advantage of BNF. I mean, I'm thinking 4 of you, 5 of you maybe, have gone through budget hearings. Most committees aren't that way. It has the potential to be crazy, so a strong recommendation to do a work session or training before the committee budget hearings.
We'll definitely run it through the speaker. For our committee, if we need training, I could do a work session on orientation for the budget cycle.
The 11th?
So when is that budget schedule going to be out? The calendar.
Did you say the BIM and the schedule's gonna be the 20th? That's what the report said.
So then that's gonna change our scheduling for oversight hearings and all that. We'd have to start that. change that.
Madam Chair,
Speaker David?
I make a motion to have a work session with FRF on July 14th. Have our special, our regular meeting on June 20th in Kayenta. And then also rescheduling our July 4th and our July 18th meeting to July 12th and July 25th. That's a motion.
Thank you, Speaker David. This takes care of the Budget and Finance Committee for June and July. Do committee members, do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Hold on.
June 14th is FRF.
So
At 1 p.m.
go over it again. What days are these?
Okay, the motion was June 4th. Yeah,
Yes.
with the Fiscal Recovery Office. And then our next meeting, June 20th, is in Kayenta
Yes.
at 10 a.m. The leadership meeting with OPBP is now rescheduled for July 11th.
What time?
I thought it was 12.
Sorry,
it's
July 12th, that was the motion.
Oh, July 12th.
9
The
a.m.
leadership meeting.
leadership meeting at 9 a.m.
Here. So we're gonna go head to head with RDC, HESI or RDC for this meeting, or in your room,
OP,
or
July 12th, that's the meeting.
or it's gonna be here, or where?
Seth wants to watch the Viking movie or something, he's ready.
The what?
The Viking movie or something, he's ready.
Okay, that's it, right? What's on the 14th then?
And then our next regular meeting is July 12th. And then the next regular meeting is
That's the
July,
leadership meeting though.
both
Being up to
Wait,
it,
so what time are you proposing for the leadership?
leadership meetings at 9 a.m.,
Okay.
and then Sabina,
10.
1 hour?
If it's a special meeting, you can
You're
also
following the
request for a
clock,
different start time. If you want to have a
Watching my back.
New Mexico.
Okay,
Okay, being up on the 12th too,
yes,
the 10th.
yes.
Okay,
And then on July 25th,
being up
yes,
at 10 too.
yes.
What's on the 14th then?
June 14th, that was not July 14th.
Range to the 20th.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, so second.
So that's the second.
And for,
Okay.
it's a work session, right?
Yes.
Like third.
Third. Okay. Okay, that's the motion. We have a second. Committee members, we have a motion before us. Do we have any questions for the motion? Chair Slater, can you, share for a little bit? I have a question.
Chair, what's your question?
Thank you. My question is, this is great that we've scheduled these items. My two questions is regards to the conversation we had this morning in the leadership meeting. We wanted to set aside time for OMB and then also OOC to do individual leadership meetings with them to talk about their policies. So I wanted to know if the committee wanted to also schedule those leadership meetings for the first week of July as well at this time. That's the first thing. The second thing is also, if we could also identify a date for the orientation for the budgeting cycle. June and July.
Come to it, comes close.
Gonna wait until June 20th to plan
Yeah,
these out?
next meeting. Then we'll be more clear, because our schedule, my schedule hasn't been filled by the chapters and gotta give them time.
Okay, I just wanted to know if we could provide OOC and OMB a target date to have all of their reports ready for July.
So the 5th is still open for me. And the 6th will not be an option.
The 13th can be another. Sometimes there's a special not be on the first Thursday for council.
I believe that, yeah, I believe that.
For the budgeting orientation, about the 23rd of June. That's the same week that he's gonna be presenting the calendar.
I'm open to the 23rd.
I'm not free, but I also don't need to be there.
Honorable Norman Begay and myself will not be on the call. We will be having the best twisties in the world in Alamo, New Mexico.
No, the 23rd.
Yeah, 23rd.
30th?
What's it, how about the 26th?
Cheap, but New Mexico style. Their style.
Original, traditional level stuff.
The grandma said we left them.
When we go, green chili.
How's the 26th?
So we kept walking.
The 26th.
26th
Remember,
of
a
June.
long walk.
For the budget orientation.
June 26th?
Yeah,
Training.
I'm available.
Okay,
On
June
26th.
26th, we're gonna do work session. Orientation.
So let's modify the,
On the budget training.
I tried to.
How much
what time?
at 9 a.m.?
10 a.m.
10 a.m., modify at 10 a.m. on the 26th to have a budget and finance committee, budget FY 2024 budget orientation.
Okay. The two items was leadership meetings with OMB and OOC.
I would suggest doing it as a Monday, I mean, a morning and afternoon session would be true.
So then that afternoon, then we can have that meeting with us. Yeah, orientation.
Actually, yeah, that's true, because we're just gonna talk further.
Yeah, so it'd
Yeah.
be like 2 hours of orientation.
I think it will be it could be 2 hours.
Yeah.
What I think that the committees, the new delegates will need some recommended, some committee structure as to how they're gonna do it. So the committees are all different and they're not efficient, is because things are different, so try to get one structure there, but also to work them through, and this is where I probably would ask OMB to come in, but to explain some of the budget documents to them. We get a whole lot of questions as to what they're trying to interpret and such, so I don't think more than 2 hours, that might be even be long.
Then we can break for lunch and actually do what we had with OMB, so that's my modification.
Okay.
So you're second.
Also,
Okay,
just get for clarification, then Speaker Damon's recommendation is to have a meeting with OOC and OMB on that afternoon for their strategic plan and all that stuff.
Yeah, that's my motion.
Mr. Buell, are you
Motion to adjourn.
available June 26th?
25th?
26th, I think.
Monday?
26th of Monday,
Yes.
to provide the policy recommendations to the committee. Okay, great.
What kind of?
Start at 10 on the 26th.
And then so 10, and then we'll do our 2-hour orientation, then we can meet with Mr. Bial at 1.
Yeah.
Mr. Bial, 1, and then we can meet with Mr. McCabe at 2, or following.
Yeah.
Following,
Well, you probably would need to be here anyways.
all mornings.
Near each other.
So we'll just spend all day with OOC and OD,
What day is that?
26th.
Of June?
Yeah. 26th.
Okay, great. Thank you, committee members. We
26?
have modification to the
26?
motion.
Monday,
I believe,
10 o'clock and.
Another question.
yes, Ms. Barbara.
I have no questions on that. I do have another question when you are finished. And my other question is the confirmation of Sean McCabe.
Wait, let's finish the scheduling. Okay,
So who's-
Vice Chair Slater, we modified the motion on to
We'll
include
do a
June
large
26th.
part of it, but
For-
we'll need
Um,
OMB.
Or we in the morning, or in the afternoon.
No.
No.
Budget
BNF orientation in the morning.
OMB and then OOC.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I can tell you.
Okay, all right, great. Ms. Nelson, can you take a roll call vote on the scheduling item?
That's for you. Tell her what you wanted to do.
Oh, okay. Why we do it?
We're just gonna do the motion now. We're gonna do the motion
Just defer it to the next.
Yeah, we're gonna defer. Okay, can we do a roll call vote?
Okay. So for clarification, for BNF training orientation in the morning of June 26th. And then in the PM,
Is the, okay, so back to the, June 26th is in the morning. The budget finance committees have an orientation on the budgeting cycle. In the afternoon, we're gonna have a leadership meeting with the Office of Management and Budget and also with the Office of the Controller to provide policy changes and recommendations to the committee.
leadership meeting for policy changes.
Well,
I thought
should we just treat it as
one?
one meeting and those are the items we're gonna have on it?
That's, yeah.
Okay, because you said a work session and a leadership meeting. So that'll be two different meetings.
It's a work session then.
No, they're two different items.
So it is two meetings.
Yes.
So if we wrap up the work session.
Okay. Roll call vote on accept or scheduling the meetings. Honorable Norman Gay, how do you vote?
No.
Thank you, Honorable Norman Gay, votes green. Honorable Amber Kenneth Cardy, how do you vote?
When I started, I vote green.
Thank you, Sudeja. Honorable Amber Kenneth Cardy votes green. Honorable Seth Damon, how do you vote?
I vote green.
Thank you, Honorable Seth Damon votes green. Marlo Ashford, how do you vote?
Green, I guess.
Thank you, Honorable Marlo Ashford votes green. Honorable Paul Slater, how do you vote?
Green?
Thank you, Honorable Paul Slater votes green. Madam Chair, we have 5 members voting in the affirmative, 0 opposing. Madam Chair, not voting. Madam Chair?
Thank you, Ms. Nelson, and the committee members. It appears we're at the end of our agenda. We're going to close the session. Do we have any written announcements today?
So do you have the insurance services meeting?
Oh, sorry, let me make that clarification for the insurance services meeting. The insurance services meeting, I believe Ms. Nakai forwarded the memo out to the committee in regards to the change in personnel at the insurance department, and the individual who was supposed to provide the orientation to the committee resigned last month.
Yeah,
Few weeks ago?
President Charlie is no longer the Insurance Services Department Director as of the 26th of May.
What happened?
Yeah, so, Sean Dale indicated that he
Transferred
wanted
to
to
him.
wait until he gets a new appointed director
I think it's.
before they do continuation of the orientation that BFC was requesting.
We'll just say postpone.
Follow
It's
up
postponed.
on some of those policies and stuff like that that you wanted to, that you had questions about. It's canceled right now.
So you're doing,
What was the lady's name that did the presentation with them?
Yolanda?
Yep.
Chicarelli?
Chicarelli. I don't know why she couldn't do it, she knows everything.
We'll have Ms. Nakai
Speak with Jonathan about that, maybe.
Okay, at this time, the recommendation from, that was sent over, I believe it's just to, that he was not available anymore. I figured it was postponed until they find an individual to fill in.
That's to be rescheduled.
Rescheduled, okay, that's the announcement that we have. Any other announcements? Doug, again?
Yeah, the first annual squad dance was going to start in Portugal, I guess, on the 19th. So it will happen that weekend, 19th to the 24th, I guess. Song and dance, get your boots out.
June? June?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Delegate Begay. Any other announcements?
There's an announcement I have that you all received. The speaker has a announcement about the economic summit, the BED, and she wanted to know which delegates plan to attend. She's trying to put together a list of delegates. That's gonna be the 20th, 21st, and 22nd of June, this week, at the Twin Arrows Casino.
Well, we have no key on the 22nd, right? Yeah, the key on the 22nd?
I'm not sure about that.
Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah. So, it says in the book. I
Okay,
might make it on the 21st, but that's about it. I'm coming back from Canada, just go that way.
I'm going to play the golf tournament on Friday, but it's on Saturday, but that's
sounds good. Thank you, everyone, for your announcements today. Motion to
On the
adjourn.
21st, I can make it from Canada that way.
Motion to adjourn.
Vice Chair Slater, motion to adjourn. Do you have a second?
Hold on, we continue. Still early.
Do you second,
Oh,
Delegate
second.
Begay? All right, Delegate Begay, second. Ms. Dawson, can you, take today's roll call?
Yes, roll call vote on adjournment. Honorable Norman M. Gay, how do you vote?
about it. Love to help you.
Thank you, Honorable Norman M. Gay votes green. Honorable Amber Kenneth Party, how do you vote?
I will green card it.
Thank you, Jason. Honorable Amber Kenneth Party votes green. Honorable Seth David, how do you vote?
I vote green.
Thank you, Honorable Seth David votes green. Honorable Aseret, how do you vote?
Green.
Thank you, Honorable Aseret votes green. Honorable Carl Slater, how do you vote?
Green?
Thank you, Honorable Carl Slater votes green. Madam Chair, we have 5 members voting in the affirmative, 0 opposing, and Madam Chair not voting. Your turn.
Thank you, Ms. Dawson, for taking today's vote. Thank you, Ms. Dante, for advising today, and also, we are ready to adjourn. So thank you for listening, everybody online.
Will you do it?
We'll see you in Kansas on June 20th.